Today we're going to have a look at the basics of respiration. Now before we get into too much detail, let's have a look at the difference between breathing and respiration. Now breathing is the physical action of inhalation and exhalation. So this is the method that we get oxygen into our body and into our cells and get rid of carbon dioxide. Now, respiration, on the other hand, is a chemical process. Now, this involves the breakdown of nutrient molecules, mainly glucose in our body, to release energy that's stored in the bonds of these molecules. Now, this energy is then in the form of ATP. Now, where breathing is because of the action of our muscles, respiration will be because of the action of enzymes. And we get two types of respiration, but we'll get into that a bit later. Now, why do we need energy? Now, firstly, we need energy for muscle contractions. Now, these include walking, even the muscles to speak, the muscles to eat and chew, the muscles to think, the muscles to move. All of that requires energy. Then we also require energy for protein synthesis. Now, protein synthesis is very important, as we know that proteins are one of the main biological molecules in our body. Proteins also make up enzymes. We get structural proteins as well, proteins in our hair and our skin. So proteins are very important. Then we also need energy for cell division or to make new cells. And this is also very important because this process is also used for the repairing of cells. Then, of course, something that also involves cell division is growth. Now, we know that growth is important, especially as a human being, from being a baby to being a grown-up, but there's also different types of growth. So we have our primary growth, where we grow from an infant to a grown-up, but we also have growth in our nails, growth in our muscles, growth in our hair, that also requires energy. Then active transport also requires energy. One of the most important examples is that of in plants, where they take up nutrients from the soil through active transport. But of course, active transport happens in the human body as well quite frequently. Then we have our nerve impulses, and we need energy to generate nerve impulses. So without energy in the form of ATP, we won't be able to react or move or think at all. Then lastly, energy is needed to maintain a constant internal body temperature, and that is something that makes us humans as mammals special. The fact that we are so-called warm-blooded animals, so we can regulate our body temperature through the use of ATP or energy. Now, we know that respiration is an enzyme-controlled reaction, meaning that the rate of the reaction, or in this case, the rate of respiration, can be changed by changing the temperature. So let's quickly look at a graph that shows us how the rate would change. So as the temperature increases, the rate of respiration will also increase. And this is because of particles increasing in kinetic energy, meaning that they would start moving faster and more collisions and more successful collisions will occur and the rate would increase. Then we get to a point where it starts decreasing as we increase the temperature. And this is because the bonds inside of the enzymes will start to break down, changing the shape of the active site of the enzymes. This means that the substrate will no longer be able to fit into the active site, and our rate of reaction will decrease. Now, the maximum rate of respiration or maximum rate of reaction will be our optimum temperature for the reaction to occur. Now, we can show these results by doing a simple experiment. Now, in this experiment, we will have a test tube. We can then add yeast into this test tube. Now, yeast is able to respirate both aerobically and anaerobically. Now, in this case, it will respirate aerobically. We can then add methylene blue indicator to the yeast solution. We can then time how long it takes the methylene blue indicator to turn from blue to colorless. Now, as the time increases for the methylene blue to go colorless, it means that the rate of respiration decreases or is taking longer. Now, we can repeat this experiment at different temperatures to see how the rate of respiration changes over different temperatures. Now, in this experiment, we have two variables, an independent variable and of course our dependent variable. Now, our independent variable is the variable that is changed on purpose. Now, in this investigation, we're looking at the effect of temperature on the rate of respiration. So the independent variable is temperature. Now, one way we can change the different temperatures is by using a water bath. We then have our dependent variable, and this is the measured variable. So in this investigation, where we look at the effect of temperature on the rate of respiration in yeast, the rate of respiration is the dependent variable. So we measure this rate by recording the time that it takes for methylene blue dye to change from blue to colorless. Now, we have to also remember when doing an investigation like this to keep all the other variables constant. So the volume and the concentration of the dye that we add needs to be constant. The volume and the concentration of the yeast suspension needs to be constant. The concentration of glucose needs to be constant, and the pH of the suspension needs to be constant. These are all other variables that can change the rate of respiration.